Congratulations on purchasing your Armory Craft Sig Sauer P320 dual adjustable trigger. In this video we're going to show you how to install the trigger and properly adjust it. Let's get started. Okay, when we open up the package we have their disclaimer: Armory Craft Sig P320 dual adjustable trigger compatible with all P320 M17s and M18s. Please use blue Loctite 242 for adjustment screws and do not use the firearm for 24 hours. All firearm parts must be installed by a qualified gunsmith. If you are not a qualified gunsmith and will attempt the installation yourself, please note that you are doing so at your own risk. No returns or refunds of any kind after the trigger installation has been attempted. Lifetime warranty against defects in materials or workmanship. Does not cover damage from abuse, incorrect installation, or other factors. And then the website you found this video on. So we have that. Some Armory Craft swag, nice sticker. And the trigger itself. So in the package here we have the trigger, very nice, which comes with the over travel screw already installed. Then we have our Allen wrench and our pre-travel adjustment screw. So the first step for me is to make sure my screws and my screw holes are nice and clean and free of oils and grease from the manufacturing process. So I'm going to remove my over travel screw and I'm going to use something to grease the threads on the screws and the holes themselves to make sure all that oil and stuff's out of there. That way when we use our Loctite 242 blue, it's going to work properly. So I like to do this first so that way after it has time to dry while we're taking apart our FCU to install the trigger. So as always, you want to make sure we're working on a safe firearm, so we're going to remove the magazine. We're going to lock the slide to the rear. We're going to physically and visually check to make sure there's no rounds in the chamber, which there's not. We're going to rotate our takedown lever and remove our slide. We'll now remove our takedown lever, put that aside. Grab our FCU by the front, lift it up, and pull it up and out. Okay, so our first step is going to be to remove our trigger bar spring, and our trigger from our FCU. In order to do that, we have to rotate our trigger forward so that it will slide out the side of the FCU. Anytime we have our Armory Craft dual adjustable trigger installed, we have to back out this pre-travel screw so that the trigger can come forward, okay? So I'm going to use my Allen wrench that's supplied by Armory Craft to back that screw out. We'll just back it out into the trigger itself. And then what I do is I lift up on the rear of my trigger bar. I'm going to lift up, pull it out, and bring it around like this. That way this leg on the trigger bar here that goes inside the sear housing will come up, out, and around the sear housing, which will rotate my trigger forward. So I'm going to pull it up, out, and around. Just like that. And then when your trigger is contacting the FCU, that's as far forward as it can go. And now I can pull my trigger straight out just like that. Okay. And then we'll just let this other stuff fall off. We have our trigger bar and our trigger bar spring. My next step is I'm going to prep the trigger for installation. So I'm going to add the Loctite to my screws and then I'm going to grease the trigger properly. So Loctite blue 242. I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to put a dab onto my over travel screw. Just like that. And then we'll insert that into the bottom of the trigger in the back hole. I'm going to run that in about halfway. Just like that. The pre-travel screw is recommended for competitive shooters and range use only, not EDC, concealed carry, or home defense pistols. So I'm going to add a generous amount of this to the screw as well, primarily on the bottom of it, because this top part sticks through the hole and it doesn't contact any threads once it's installed and adjusted. So we have that on the bottom. And we'll insert this into the back side of our trigger. I'm going to run that in until just to see it start coming out this front hole. just like that. Next, I'm going to check the fitment between my trigger bar and my trigger itself. So the pin on the trigger here goes through the hole in the trigger bar. Make sure it goes on nice and easily and it pivots no problem. This is a very high quality manufactured product, so fitment should be silky smooth just like that. Okay, so that I know will fit properly. I'm going to put some Tetra grease in the pocket here where the pin is. I like Tetra grease because it stays put. Whatever you use to lube up yours will be fine. So we'll put some grease in the pocket there, and I'm also going to put grease on the pins where the trigger pivots. Then I'm going to use my Q-tip to evenly distribute that around the pin. So now we will install our trigger bar and our trigger bar spring. So the hole in my trigger bar here and the leg on my spring, I'm going to put that together just like this. I'm going to hold it with my finger, and then I'll put the loop on the trigger bar spring through the back side of the loop on the chassis, just like that. I'm going to rotate this around, just like that. So the leg on my trigger bar is behind my sear housing. It's flush against the side, and it's flush against the front here. Next, I'm going to insert my trigger through the side of the chassis, and then I'm lining up the pin on my trigger bar and the pivot pin on the trigger with the hole in the back side here. Sometimes this falls right together, other times it takes a little bit of maneuvering things around. So make sure your pin is going to go straight through that hole because it won't press in if it's not. Just like that. So my pin is perfectly flush with my chassis. My trigger bar is sandwiched in between my trigger and the chassis itself. Now I'm going to use my finger to push back on the trigger while rotating the trigger bar out, or forward, and then put this leg into the sear housing. Just like that. So it's only recommended to use this trigger with completely factory parts, okay? The Apex trigger bar, the Gray Guns competition kit, and all that other stuff is use at own risk. This was not designed to work with any other products other than the factory SIG products that come installed in the FCU. So before I put this back into my grip module, you can make these adjustments with it in the grip module, but the pre-travel screw has to be screwed in quite a bit before it even starts to do anything. So it's a lot easier to do this with it outside of the grip module. So I'm going to use the Allen wrench that Armory Craft has supplied, and I'm going to run my pre-travel screw in until it just contacts my FCU chassis. You can see it coming out there. And there it's contacting the FCU, and it's actually starting to move my trigger rearward. Okay, so I'm going to do that there, and then I'm going to run my over travel screw in just a little bit. So now we can install this into our grip module. Put the rear in first. Sometimes you have to push the trigger back to get it to clear the hole in the grip module. I'll press it firmly into place. Reinstall our takedown lever. And then we'll reinstall our slide. Make sure your guide rod is centered. And there you go. Okay, now that we have the trigger in and it operates properly, we're going to actually make sure we're clear one more time. So physically and visually check to make sure there's no round in the chamber. We're going to be pulling our trigger quite a bit to make these adjustments. So we're going to work on our pre-travel and over-travel adjustments. And your pre-travel is you mount from full rest to the wall. The wall is where you feel resistance. So that movement right there is your pre-travel from full rest to the wall. And then as we continue to pull our trigger, that is called creep, and that is the mechanical part of your trigger actually working until it breaks. which is when the firearm discharges, and then any movement after that is your over travel. So you'll slide cycles after the break, and then the forward motion of the trigger to the reset right there, and then it's ready to fire again. So rack your slide, and we're going to work on our over travel adjustment first. So we're going to take our Allen wrench and the screw that is in the back going straight in. We're going to keep making small adjustments to that until my trigger does not function anymore. So about a quarter of a turn is what you can get in here. So we'll do a quarter turn, rack the slide, see if it functions. Quarter of a turn, rack the slide, see if it functions, until it doesn't function anymore. So quarter of a turn, rack the slide, doesn't function. So that means we've gone too far and we need to back it off. So back it off a minimum of a quarter of a turn. Everybody has their own personal preference to the amounts that they like. So there's my over travel basically all eliminated, and what that's going to do is shorten the reset of the trigger. Okay. And then next we'll work on our pre-travel. Okay, so the pre-travel adjustment, we're going to use a micrometer, and it's set to 2 millimeters right now. If yours isn't metric, it'll be 0.0785 thousandths of an inch, or 5/64. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to keep making adjustments to our pre-travel screw, which is the screw going in at an angle, the longer one. And this pre-travel screw is for recreational use only, okay? Competition use, range use, anything but everyday carry, concealed carry, or home defense, okay? So we're going to keep running that screw in until there's no less than 2 millimeters of pre-travel. Okay, mine's pretty much all adjusted up the way I want it. So what I do is I take my micrometer, and the left edge on this side I place directly above the forward facing part of my trigger, and then I'm looking straight down through that gap, and I'm moving my trigger back and forth, gauging how far it moves. Okay, I'm going to keep making adjustments to that pre-travel screw. Again, it's the forward facing one, until that's at my desired pre-travel amount. So everybody has their own personal preference. Some people like a lot more pre-travel than others, but the manufacturer recommends no less than 2 millimeters on that pre-travel adjustment. Okay, now that we have our adjustments all where we want them, we want to double check things. There are different situations or conditions your pistol can be in. What I mean by that is a loaded magazine versus an unloaded magazine. Obviously a loaded magazine is going to push up more on your slide versus a unloaded magazine. And then a brand new pistol versus one that is breaking in or broken in, it's going to be different tolerances as well. So we've made our adjustments with the slide being away from our grip module this whole time. Now we should take and squeeze the two together and double check our measurements, okay, to make sure that it's still within specifications. So just double check, that way everything's going to operate properly, no matter if it's loaded or unloaded or brand new versus broken in. Okay, now that we have our adjustment screws where we want them, I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup. We'll use a Q-tip or something to get inside here and get that excess Loctite out of there before it hardens and dries, because once it does, you're not going to be able to get it out of there. We're going to let this set for 24 hours before using it. That'll give it time to harden, and that'll prevent the screws from moving on you, okay? You can also see here I have the red Armory Craft trigger. That looks very nice, especially in a Legion. We have the FDE version, which looks very nice in the M17. I use the two-tone, which is stainless and black. I use that in my X-Compact. Blue will be available, and all stainless will also be available. And you can see I have the Sport takedown lever installed as well. So there you have it. There's the Armory Craft P320 dual adjustable trigger install video and adjustment. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.